Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. My fiance and I got engaged a year ago. She had a child from a previous marriage. He was 16 years old and very stubborn. They had moved into my house a few months ago. He was a rebel. It was typical teenage behavior. I had gone through this with my daughter, but he seemed to get into a lot of trouble. My fiance has tried talking to him, but to no avail. Recently, he was begging his mother and father for a car. They had refused to buy one multiple times, but he just wouldn't take no for an answer. He threw a lot of tantrums, from slamming doors to not coming home on time. We were frustrated. I just wanted some peace. Having a teenager around is frustrating. No matter how much you try to love them, they're going to hate you anyway, and you have to be fine with that. They'll come back eventually. I bought a new car a few months ago. It hadn't even been half a year. My to be stepson decided that it would be fun to take it for a drive without asking me. He didn't even have a proper driver's license. There had to be an adult with him while he was driving. My fiance found out that the car wasn't in the garage. She checked the garage camera and found the culprit. She called me up that day, and I was praying that both he and the car came back home safely. The car was very expensive, and damage to it would cost me a lot. When I got back home, he still hadn't returned. He wasn't answering our calls either, and it was frustrating. It was 1 a.m. when he finally came home. We went into the garage and turned the lights on. Did he really think he could sneak into the house without us noticing? When he stepped out, my fiancé started screaming at him. He wasn't responding, which was weird. I immediately walked towards the car and checked all sides. I was very, very angry, and he knew it. On the side of the car, there were huge scratches. He obviously was fed up. My fiancée came around and checked it. Her face paled, and then she went red with rage. This boy needed serious discipline. He hated going to his father's place, as his father was very strict. I called his father and told him what happened. While I was speaking to him, my stepson started begging me not to tell him. Even with insurance, I would have to pay over $5,000. My wife smacked him multiple times on the head. His father said he was coming over immediately. I decided to get a quote on the damage later in the day. We went inside the house and waited for his father to come. My fiancé and I decided to cut off his allowance and ground him. We knew he snuck out anyways, so I decided to change his room. He would sleep in a smaller room, and he couldn't have friends over either. His father picked him up, and he reluctantly went with him. We thought it would be better if he stayed with his father for a couple of weeks. I'll be honest, for the few weeks he wasn't here, the house was peaceful. I could breathe a sigh of relief. He was about to be back in a week, though. He didn't like his new room very much. At least he didn't start another tantrum. 2 weeks went by with no drama. On the third day, I was home early. I was in a good mood, but it all went downhill when I found him in my room with another girl doing it. I yelled at them to put some clothes on, and they scrambled up immediately. My stepson walked out trying to play it cool and smirked at me. I slapped him hard across the face. The girl ran out. I could care less about his sexual life. We weren't conservative, but by doing it in my fiancé and I's bedroom, he crossed a line. He stood there frozen. I had never raised my hand at him, but he needed to be disciplined. I screamed at him, asking what was wrong with his head. I dragged him up to his room and locked him in. I knew he vaped too, but my fiancée didn't. She was about to be home any second. I called his father again, and he was furious. I was going to expose all of his bad habits today. Once they both arrived, I told them what happened. Both of them were ready to whoop his ass. I asked both of them to check his room too. They not only found vape, but also cigarettes, some type of powder, and weed too. I only caught him with the vape once. The other 3 was surprising. This wasn't good. We brought him down. We needed to have a serious discussion with him. I didn't know how to handle this. Was it the drugs that made him act out? He said he hadn't used the powder. He confessed to vaping and smoking. He told us that he had recently started smoking. That was a good thing. At least he wasn't addicted yet. Though I was angry about what happened earlier, I was still concerned about him. That evening, we had a long discussion and decided to make some serious changes. Update 1. The three of us decided to put him on a program to rid him of his nicotine intake. His father wanted him to change schools, but I suggested homeschooling for a while. I explained that there were similar groups that indulged in these habits everywhere. We needed to reel him in before he went too far. They agreed with me. We could hire a tutor for him. He didn't take it too well. There was a lot of screaming, crying, and raging involved. I hadn't gone through such extreme methods with my daughter. She hadn't indulged in stuff like this. I had a talk with her about what was happening. I thought having an outside perspective would make me see this situation differently. Update 2, 3 weeks later. My daughter suggested registering him for different activities. She coaxed him into joining a football club. We also put him in art class. His father had caught him sketching a few times. I'll give you all an update on how everything is going later. Update 3, 2 months later. My stepson seems to listen to my daughter. I didn't know they got along that well. She takes him shopping, which he surprisingly likes. He hated going with his parents and me. She hangs out with him every other week, and they either go out for dinner or order takeout. My fiance says having a sibling is good for him. We considered admitting him to therapy just as he could have someone who is not in the family to talk to. We'll see how he reacts. Update 4. It has been around 8 months. My stepson is doing well. He seems happy. My wife is pregnant, and that came as a surprise to both of us. We got married 2 months ago. He seems to be very excited about the new baby. He keeps poking her stomach and talking to it, even though the bump is barely showing. It's hilarious sometimes. We talked about him going back to school, but he says he likes this routine better. He says he gets a lot of time to engage in different creative and sporting activities this way. His grades are up, so we didn't see the need to change anything. Let's not put him under unnecessary stress. He even got a job and, surprisingly, has learned how to cook. We also made a few changes to where and with whom he stays. His therapist recommended letting him stay at either of our places for longer periods and not changing every week. We made this change around 6 to 7 months ago, and we can see how much healthier this routine is for him. When he is at our place, he makes plans with his father on his own to hang out and vice versa. We also make it a point to not miss out on him. His father lives around 20 to 30 minutes away, so it isn't that far. He is responding to us positively and is not stuck on his phone all day. We all are very happy and excited right now. NTA. Teenagers are, well, teenagers. Though I love my children, I feel like running away and not coming back for a day or two sometimes. I deal with my teenagers much more calmly now. I think the multiple changes over some time have shown results. There are no poses, groups, or gangs that would judge him anymore, and that gives him plenty of freedom to be himself without the peer pressure to act or talk a certain way. I didn't homeschool my first 2 children. I can see the difference with my other 3. Sleeping with somebody in your parents' room is, well, messed up. I would have slapped him across the face if he had smirked at me while walking out. It seemed like he had his bad boy persona on. I'm glad he is doing well now, and you're not the a-hole. Bringing up a girl is very different from bringing up a boy. You need to treat them equally, yes, but to think that they both need the same things all the time is a mistake. I'm surprised to see you, your wife, and her ex deal with him together. You have a healthy family dynamic. No wonder you were able to overcome this together. It must have taken a lot of work to reach this place. Next story. I'll start this off by saying I'm a born and raised vegetarian. I've never eaten meat, let alone learned to prepare it. My husband and I are newly married and recently bought our first apartment. It's small, but it's ours, and it's across the road from his place of work, which was a bonus since he is often on call. Per his family tradition, the most recently wed couple hosts Christmas dinner. I initially tried to offer it to my sister-in-law as she had wanted to host the year previously, but brother-in-law married 2 months after her before Christmas, so she never got the opportunity. Additionally, we are a vegetarian home and our one-bedroom apartment isn't ideal for hosting. While my sister-in-law was thrilled, the rest of the family insisted that we had to host. I was told that as long as I got food for everyone, that it would be fine. Here's where I might be the a-hole. I misunderstood. I thought this meant as long as I had enough food and made sure to accommodate food allergies that they would be happy. Christmas Day, my husband had work until 4 p.m., so I was left preparing dinner alone. But I still put together a feast, including a plant-based roast. People started coming over and even commented on how delicious everything smelled. Once my husband arrived, he greeted the family and joined me in the kitchen for finishing touches and taking everything to the table. The family began to gather, and a few people commented on how good everything looked until father-in-law asked, "Where's the ham?" My husband explained that I wasn't comfortable making meat, especially ham, since undercooked pork can be especially dangerous, and that instead we had a plant-based roast alternative. And father-in-law proceeded to make remarks about how they drove an hour for plants. After even the people who made positive comments changed their tune, talking about how it was missing something, etc. At one point, mother-in-law said that she wished they'd had sister-in-law host. My husband snapped and told them to stop disrespecting the meal and me, since I had worked hard on it. Mother-in-law argued back that I disrespected them by not respecting their dietary choices and that she believed she was clear when she told me to prepare food for everyone. My husband told her that if she was going to continue to be disrespectful, that she could leave. Shortly after, everyone left. But my husband has been getting texts since about how my selfishness ruined Christmas, possibly the last father-in-law would be around for. I feel horrible that he's in the middle of all this. This was my mistake. But at the same time, I was clear that we are vegetarian and that I didn't even want to host. I guess I'm looking for an outside perspective. Am I the a-hole? Edit 1. For the people asking if his family was aware, we just had a fully vegetarian catered wedding 4 months ago, so yes. Edit 2. I'm French Canadian, and ham wasn't the best translation. A better translation is cottage roll, which is fully raw in store. Thank you to @Matthews, Smug Manager. Update. Brother-in-law apparently frequents Reddit quite a bit and found this post, sharing it with my in-laws. They read it over as well as many of the replies and called me directly. All calls and texts up to this point had been to husband. And actually apologized. I'm still in shock. They want to meet somewhere, even suggested that I could pick a vegetarian restaurant, have a talk, and extend their apology in person. I'd be lying if I didn't admit that my guard is up, but I'm doing my best to be positive and go into this with an optimistic attitude. NTA. It's your house. You make what you want. They can make all the meat they want next Christmas at their house. They basically imposed on you anyway. You went out of your way to cook for them and probably pay for all the food too. You can make whatever the hell you want. You being vegetarian is a dietary choice. Them craving and expecting meat on the holiday is not. If anything, they were disrespecting your dietary choice. NTA, wow. The parents and anyone else who complained are all the AH. Who goes to someone's house, family or not, and complains about the food? That's incredibly rude. They knew you were a vegetarian, asked you to make a feast, and didn't give you a mandatory list of dishes to cook. Not every meat-eating family has ham on Christmas. Mine has turkey. You're not psychic. If they wanted you to make a ham, they should have said so. It then would have been your choice whether to decline or have your husband prepare it or something. It is each spouse's responsibility to manage communication with their own family. So it is absolutely his job to stick up for you and shut down this outlandish behavior from his family. If anyone ruined Christmas, it was mother-in-law and father-in-law because they brought negative energy and snarky comments. If his family celebrates Christmas as a religious holiday, your husband needs to send a text to every person who's complaining and tell them that if they think ham is the true meaning of Christmas, he'll be praying extra hard for them in the coming year. If they aren't religious, he can just point out the absurdity of thinking one missing dish ruins a whole holiday. Would they have reacted the same way if they couldn't have ham because sister-in-law had accidentally burned it at her house? Your in-laws are assuming that now that you have married into their family, that they have authority over you, that they can insist that you must host because it is their tradition, that they can insist you serve food you do not eat and do not know how to cook because it is their preference. Marrying a person does not make his parents your boss. You and your husband are in charge of your own home, kitchen, and table. You decide if you want to host, and you decide what you want to serve. You did not make a mistake. You did your best to comply with their demands. They were incorrect to assume that a vegetarian would serve them ham, and they were overbearing to insist you host them when you preferred not to. Your husband can let them know that you will not be hosting any future family gatherings for the foreseeable future. He can say it's because you are unable to meet their expectations, which has a lovely double meaning. Or if he's willing, he can say it's because they insulted you in your own home. You tried your best to meet unreasonable demands. NTA. Next story. Husband and I, 34, 35, brother, Jack, and sister-in-law, Hannah, 22, 24. My husband and I recently got married. About a week before the event, Jack and Hannah asked if they could take their wedding pictures as well after our ceremony and during the reception. I asked if they meant when everything was over, but they clarified that they wanted people in the pictures. The reason for their request was that they eloped, so they didn't get to have the whole wedding experience, and they wanted the pictures to show their future kids and hang on their future home. I can understand why they would want that, so I told them that they could take pictures, but either before the event or after the guests had left. That's because they planned to come dressed in wedding attire, and I didn't want them to be wearing that during the wedding. They tried to convince me to change my mind, but I stood my ground with them. They could take the pictures, and they ended up saying that they didn't want to take them anymore. I thought nothing of it and just carried on with my life. Until the day of the wedding, they arrived with a photographer, and Hannah was wearing a long white dress. The guests had already arrived, so I told my MOH to please tell them to change their clothes. Hannah and Jack refused, so the groomsmen kicked them out. After the wedding, my mother asked where they were, and I told her. She agreed that they shouldn't have done it, but that I could have let it slide since they were already here. She also said that everyone who attended the wedding knew who the couple was, so it's not like they would have caused any confusion. I'm beginning to feel bad because they just wanted to have nice memories and pictures to show in the future, and I ruined it for them. My husband and MOH say that I did nothing wrong, but I feel like they're biased. AITA, if I am, I'll apologize and offer to pay them back for the photographer. NTA, you were more than generous in offering them the chance to take photos before or after the wedding. The level of entitlement they have to even ask to take photos in their wedding outfits during your wedding celebration is astounding. If you elope, surely you are actively choosing to not partake in that side of things anyway. Good on you for standing your ground, OP. Until the day of the wedding, they arrived with a photographer, and Hannah was wearing a long white dress. The guests had already arrived. They planned on showing up to your wedding and acting like the guests were there for their wedding. I guarantee they were going to get even more bonkers and ask the DJ to play their playlist so the photographer could take photos of their first dance. You did the right thing by putting a stop to it. They are really young, and if they wanted a bigger wedding experience, they could have waited a few years until they could afford it. They chose to elope. The idea that their future kids would care in the slightest about whether they had a fancy wedding picture in the house is stupid. NTA. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl